Hello, friends, and welcome back to Page Two and in the Friday Conversation. Very excited this week with a great guest. First, Paromita, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Paromita. I'm from India. I like to read in a variety of genres, and I loved the failures. So I'm very excited about this episode.
Awesome. And Benjamin, can you introduce yourself too, please?
My name is Benjamin Lyer, and well, that's not true, but for the purposes of this interview, we'll roll with it. I'm a writer, an occasional musician, aspiring filmmaker from beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, which I like to say is not as bad as you might think. And yeah, that's about it for me.
But are the winters as bad as we think?
Oh, they're so much worse. They're just awful.
I always see the Great Lakes, that whole area is gets brutal. But.
Yeah, there's a fun little band right up near the lake where I live, about 3 miles wide, called the Snow Belt, that just gets slaughtered. It's a lot of fun. Good sledding.
Yeah, I bet. Sledding everywhere. Yeah, no traction. Yeah. But can you tell us a little bit about the failures?
Yes. So the failures is a big, I guess you would call it a epic fantasy, though it is probably technically a little bit more on the science fiction end of the spectrum, but it's written, and it reads like a fantasy, or at least that's how I intended it. It's about a secondary sort of place that's not Earth, that the sky broke long ago and all the lights went out and the power is slowly fading, and now civilization and light and hope are confined to these very small, last flickering little embers in this vast darkness. And it's about a group of sort of failed heroes that are trying to come together to maybe give the world and themselves one last shot at redemption. But of course there are some other people in the world and other creatures that have other ideas and designs, and hanging over all of it, or maybe buried underneath it, is the larger threat of the giant that is trapped in a prison, and if it were to be released, might just destroy what little light is left.
Parvita smiling. She just finished it, so.
Okay, so this is, I'm not obsessive, by the way, but I read it in early August, I think, or first week of August. And then it's supposed to be a trilogy, so I was like, okay, I'll reread it before book 2. And then I was like, I kind of want to reread it right now. So I went and reread it again. So finished it twice.
Oh my gosh, that made my whole month.
It was. I know that this gets said about a lot of books sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't quite live up. That it's really unique. But there was a buzz on one of the Discord servers I'm on, and there were some people who were reading it and who were like, "This is very cool." And so then I went and looked at the Amazon page for this book, and it had a blurb by one of my top fantasy authors, which is Tad Williams. And he had this blurb where he was like, think of Dark Tower, which I've only read the first 2 books. But then he said, also think about the gothic sort of vibe of Gormenghast, which is again one of my top favorite fantasy works. So I was like, I have to read this. And I read it and I just loved it. It has that, immediately the world just pulls you in. I mean, that was my feeling. So I guess my first sort of question would be, and then I read on the website and also on I think Reddit AMA that you've been conceiving of this world for almost 30 years. So roughly. So what was the kernel of this idea? It is just it is truly magical, without being magic. That's my feeling, at least.
Thank you so much. The 30 years is a great and fun thing to say. It is, of course, a little hyperbolic. I was not working solely on this book for 30 straight years. There were big chunks of time where I barely touched it, and but I originally had the first idea that would turn into this about 30 years ago when I was 18 years old, and it is a very incongruous gestation. I don't know if that's a word. Jeez, I'm supposed to be the writer over here. But it's a incongruous sort of weird. It's a weird place for it to start. Let's say it. I was at a without going on too long on the story, I was at the Natural History Museum with my little nephews and nieces, and they had a traveling exhibit of the original. I don't think they're oil, but gouache, whatever medium they're in, the original paintings for Dinotopia. I don't know if you're familiar with the at one time very famous children's book Dinotopia. And I didn't know anything about it, but I saw these paintings, and they're very richly detailed secondary world about this sort of utopia where dinosaurs and humans coexist. But he put so much thought and detail and artistry into this world and how it would actually work, and I was absolutely obsessed. And I went home that night and I got my notebook and I started sketching out ideas for my version of that. And that was I don't know if I came up with the name Wanderlands that night, but I came up with that pretty early. And then just over the course of 30 years, just every time I saw or read something I loved, I would try to steal it and shove it into this giant unwieldy thing. And then, finally, closer to maybe about 10 years ago, I started the pretty serious business of throwing out what didn't work, really figuring out what I really wanted it to be and loved, paring it down, figuring out the stories, figuring out how the characters interact with each other, and turning it into something that people would maybe actually want to read. So yeah, that's the story of where the failure started. Yeah. Might not be where people expect, but
when I was reading the book, it was not just the world which immediately pulled me in, but also the book functions. It has this sort of mystery box puzzle vibe, and so I think it sort of invites the reader into speculating and guessing, and some of the guesses also were right for me, which again, lovely feeling. And it all felt very intentional. When I was reading the book and I was nearing maybe past the halfway point, I was like, this is such a massively clever book in terms of structure, and not just the puzzles, but you have lore bits with the epigraphs and different kind of lore documents. How did you keep all this together? How difficult was it to write or conceive of this book structurally?
Oh boy, that is a wonderful question and doesn't have an easy answer. In a certain sense, it's nothing about it was really easy. And I would love to say, well, I just I figured out exactly how I wanted it all to work, and then it all worked that way. But it was years and years of trying something, finding a piece of it that I really loved, a connection that I really wanted to have happen. I love surprising the reader, maybe a little too much. That was always one of the most fun things for me to do, was to set. Those were the kind of books I liked the most, is where you don't quite know what's going on, and then when you find out what's going on or you figure it out, it just, it feels so good, right? So when I was trying to, without giving too much in the way of spoilers, there's a lot of interlocking puzzles, and I almost think of it like a puzzle game, like Myst, or like a video game like that, where you just have to work through it a bunch of times, and then I can't claim that all of those connections and those puzzles and the ways the reveals worked were in very early versions of the book. I knew I wanted to do more of that, but a lot of times it would be more like I would think of an idea, I'd think of a character, I'd realize that, I can make this connection. That would be really cool if we discovered this 3/4 of the way through the book, that whatever's happening is tied to this other thing in an interesting way. I think what I was willing to do that the reason why it worked, I guess I'm slowly working myself around to saying, is I was willing to go, oh, that would be really cool, but that means I have to throw out 3/4 of this book and start again and like rewrite it because everything's different now. And I just did that. I don't know how, so many times. And so it was a very long process of I've thrown millions of words away. And then rewriting them and finding different ways into the story and finding those connections over the course of quite a long time. So it definitely wasn't. There was no overarching master plan, I guess you could say.
So when you remove sections, I'm assuming that you have to be sure that you didn't remove a string from somewhere else. So you have to go back and see any connective tissue that you may have removed on accident that may leave something else you've set up or something that may connect to what you removed.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's, I think when you're doing anything, complicated like that, whether it's a book or a video game or a magic trick, you have to keep your eye on the details, and nobody can keep it all in their head at once. Copy editors and my wonderful editors and the people that have my advanced readers are great at pointing out, like, oh, hey, isn't that supposed to be a thing? That doesn't make any sense. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that was in 3 versions ago, and I took it out for some reason. I forgot that you needed to know that for the other thing. So yeah, just a lot. It's not the most exciting answer, but a lot of it is just work. It's just paying attention to the details, reading through, making notes, and crossing your T's and dotting your I's.
I wanted to ask you maybe about characters. Very, very vibrant cast, multi POV. One of the things that I got personally from the book which was very meaningful to me, is you focus a lot on people who've maybe fallen through the cracks, or who are maybe not fitting into the new world order, or for whom things have gone wrong and they've not quite got back on track. And it's a lot of internal journey as well, along with this wild ride through the Wonderlands. How much of that was an iterative process regarding the characters? Did you get to know them as you wrote them?
Some of them. Man, such interesting questions that I'm like, oh, can I take 3 hours to answer that one question? Can I write an entire book about that? I definitely am always more attracted to the internal journey of characters, as pretentious as that sounds to say. I, of course, want them to have wonderful, awesome adventures and fight with swords and stuff, but the change that you go through and the things that you struggle with internally are always going to be more just interesting for me to write about. And some of the characters, they definitely come from a spectrum. Like Sophie is maybe the main character, sort of this sort of. Oh, that's great to hear. She just walked into my head one day when I basically asked the question of, like, what would Lyra from the Golden Compass be like if saving the world had ruined her life and now she's a 30-year-old bitter drunk? And I was like, oh, I know everything about this character is boom right there. And it's taken a lot of work to sort of get my writing to the point where I was able to show others what was in my head, and my agent and editors and whatever have helped a lot with that, because what I knew about the character wasn't always coming across on the page, and I think it does now, which is a really nice feeling. And then other characters like Gunn and Jackie started off very different, with very different arcs and very different ideas of who they were supposed to be. Even James, one of the Lost Boys, the sort of little persnickety kid, they took, in a certain sense, like I knew I wanted, like, James to be very stubborn and heartbreaking and in the shadow of his supremely talented older brother, but took a lot of iterations in writing to kind of trying to find the voice. I think I'm working my way around to saying that finding the voice is sometimes, a lot of times I'll know what I want the character to be and what I want their struggle to be, but finding the voice to show that to the reader is sometimes very difficult and takes a lot of iterations. I honestly don't know if I answered your question with that, but
it's well, it's sort of the voice thing really struck because each POV chapter when we follow, and there's a game with that, there's a mystery with that, which readers really have to read the book to find out what I'm talking about. I mean, but it was so good, and I cannot say this without spoiling, so I won't say it. But there is a particular technique employed which makes sure that the psyche is consistent despite changes, a certain kind of change, which is brilliant. And that is actually what clues into the reader. I mean, I thought it was brilliant, which clues in the reader that, oh, maybe this is actually what's going on. There are pseudonyms, or well, not pseudonyms, but name changes for characters. I'll leave it at that. There's something going on. There's something more than just alternating between POVs. There's one more layer to that, which we learn as we go through the book. That was wonderful. One other thing which, I mean, this is why I said I thought that Steve might like this book a lot, is because there are parts of it which are just cinema. Like for me, that's the vibe I got. If this was a cinema or a video game, I don't know what would be the best format. Who do you think would direct it? And can I venture a guess mentally, and then I'll share it later on? I have a guess.
So I actually have an idea for a video game set in this world, but it's nothing like, it's like a Minecraft style building game, which is very weird, which is maybe someday. But I think that to tell the story the way to kind of preserve the thing that I like about the book, the complicated structure, you'd need sort of like a TV show or a series to tell it. I think it'd be pretty difficult to do in a film. In terms of director, that's like a wish list, right? Like for one, like Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan, and I still can't say his last name correctly. But yeah, he's my favorite director of the world. He doesn't work in TV, and I'm glad he doesn't. But like, obviously, like if we're just daydreaming, then yeah, having Denis look at it would be great. But there's a few Michael Sapochnik that did a bunch of episodes of Game of Thrones, Jeremy Soliner, who's done a lot of TV. Mm-hmm. These are more like TV directors, but just they're amazing. And then I actually really like I forget his name, Rafe. I think it's Rafe that's doing the Wheel of Time adaptation. I think
Rafe Judkins, yes.
Yeah, he's not getting as much credit as he should for adapting those monsters of books. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a little bit my wish list. I'm curious what your wish list is.
My immediate vibe, it's none of these people. It was Tim Burton.
Oh yeah.
Because the movie that I thought, there were two movies, because first of all, Wonderlands and Alice in Wonderland is one of my all-time favorite books. So this is like the dark Alice part of Wonderland. It's this very dark aesthetic, and it's actually literally also true. But anyway, Tim Burton with Edward Scissorhands, and then there's this character called. Well, he's handing out this beverage. I won't say who it is, but he's handing out this beverage, and he's very coy and very dainty. And then there's this very sinister side to him that sometimes reminded me of Willy Wonka in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So it was just those vibes. Like he has that dark whimsy that I associated with some parts of the book.
Yeah, that's I think Tim Burton is like too too big of a name for me to even fantasize about. Like that would be too wild. Like that'd be too much to even like. My imagination won't even go there. But yeah, I mean, Edward Scissorhands was one of my favorite movies of all time when I
It's
was growing
beautiful,
up.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, especially early Tim Burton, but like he's, he rarely misses. But I also like the novel, but Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the original
Rolled
book.
out. Oof.
Yeah,
One of my favorites.
Literally my first memories are of reading that book, and my mom, I don't really remember doing this, but she taught me to read when I was like 3, and she would say I would just read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I'd get to the end, I'd flip it over, I'd open it up, and I'd just start reading it again. So yes, Tim Burton would be amazing. I'd love that.
Being a fan of Denis' work, are you a fan of Enemy?
Oh yeah,
That's such a great movie.
I like Sicario better. Like I'm on that side of things. Enemy's not in my top 3, but it's probably in my top 5 of his. I didn't love it as much the first time I watched it, but it rewards rewatching. Right? There's so much there, and the color palette they shoot. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
Who shoots an entire movie in yellow and then makes it work?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, love it.
So after kind of conceiving of the world and through all these years kind of adding to it and taking it apart, when did you decide to write the book and to publish it?
I'm very bad at like time and space basically, but I can't remember the exact year. There was, because I was very interested in music was sort of my first love. I wanted to be a rock star, and then I realized that I didn't want to sit in a tiny van for 10 years with 4 other stinky boys. So and then I got really into film, and I wanted to be a director really bad, and I made some short films and stuff, and just realized like that's not quite where my skill set lies. And then I got really into video games, and I want to be a video game. Well, I did put out a video game, but I always wanted to do all these cool jobs. And then a friend of mine, we were like having drinks, and she was like, you've been writing like that, like you keep doing all this stuff, but you've been writing that entire time. And I was a little like, I never really wanted to be like a writer, was never that exciting to me. I wanted to be all these cool things, and then sort of looking at myself and being like, oh, that is clearly what I do the most and the best. Maybe I should just embrace it. So that was kind of a turning point. And then obviously I have and had other ideas for books and stuff, but if I was ever going to sit down and put the work into like turning something into a book, it was always going to be the Wanderlands, and it was always going to be the failures. So that was I don't remember exactly what year I started doing that. It took me about 6 years to get it to the point where I was ready to send it out and try to find an agent, and then I was able to find an agent very quickly, and then we sold it very quickly. But then I had probably another 6 years of waiting for it to get published. And also doing some pretty heavy revisions on it and stuff during that time. So it's been a while of gestating for sure.
Wow, 6 years.
It was a long wait, yeah. But I made a video game and wrote an entire other book in that time, so it wasn't wasted time.
How do you fix this? You've used so many different kinds of lore documents in these epigraphs, and then you also have these asides. Is that something you always wanted to have? It's very, very unique to read, and all of them felt, they have that voice. Some of them are a bit snarky, and some of them are a bit sad. Was it always part of the writing or the world?
Oh, I don't know if it's always part of it. It's something I've always liked. I've always enjoyed footnotes. I've always enjoyed even stuff like old Michael Crichton books where he would really like authentically fake FBI transcripts and and stuff like that always helped me like get into the world. The old the Robin Hobb assassin books had a lot of those little like just almost like documents from within the world that to me always made it feel very lived in and very authentic. And they're also giving you sometimes some information that might be very awkward to just have a character say to another character, or info dump in the text. And I always liked that stuff, and this book was sort of like my anything I liked, it was going in there. So I was going to try to shoehorn it in. And for again, I'm shouting out my editors and my agent a lot, but there was probably too much of that stuff in there, and they helped sort of pick out the best of them. But it was also served a little bit of a mercenary purpose in that it's a very hopefully not to put anybody off trying it or reading it. I think it has character moments and it's fun to read too, but it's a difficult world that it's built in, and there's a lot of information that the reader needs to learn so that they can even know what the hell's going on. So there was a lot of little like I hesitate to say magic tricks because it implies some sort of magic, but like little tricks wherever I could use to give the reader information in a fun way that didn't feel like work, didn't feel like they're reading like, you know, a history textbook. I tried to take advantage of that like wherever I could, and not again have the characters just, oh, this reminds me of the Great Battle of Mer, where, you know. So I'm really, it's wonderful to hear that that kind of thing isn't for every reader, and I think some readers don't like that part of the book as much. And it's wonderful to hear that, you know, at least one likes it here. This is great.
Do you want to hear a secret? You mentioned this in your sort of acknowledgements or your afterword. One of my favorite books of all time, fantasy books, other than Gormenghast, is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. So,
yeah,
I that book is again another frighteningly clever book and so easy to read. I mean, it's not off. It's just you have to vibe with it. If you vibe with it, then it works, and if you don't vibe with it, fair enough. But it's such a beautiful book, and this book, as soon as you said Clark, because it doesn't say, I was like, yes.
That's high praise. I love that book. It's one of I have a handful of books I probably read once a year, and that book's on there. It's just it's so rich. Every time I've read that book probably 20, 30 times, and well, maybe not that many. Not that old yet, but I've read it a bunch, and I'm like, it hasn't been 20 years since it came out, has it? But I've read it a bunch of times. I'm a very bad exaggerator, guys. I'm sorry. But every time I read it, it's just, you find something new. You find a new color. You find a new almost way of looking at the world, which to me is the mark of just a really great book. So, yeah, of course I wanted to channel every bit of, I want to steal every little bit of Clark I could, put it in my own book. That's how we do this.
It feels like, just like the world of Strange and Norrell, maybe we don't get all the details, but it feels like the author knows, and if we were to probe, we would be told. And this world feels the same way. Do you actually have it all written down? Do you have like copious amount of notes, or is it all in your head? This is something that I'm always very curious about.
I'm really fascinated with the way that other authors do this. Okay, so I did write a like very detailed history of the Wanderlands since the like very beginning through all of the stuff that happened in sort of a dry like biblical style, like this happened and then that happened. It's not prose, but it's there so I could get like, okay, here's how all this works. This is why this happened. This is the order of blah blah blah. It is wildly out of date at this point because I haven't updated it in 6 years probably, but it was as long as a book, like it was as long as a novel. And I'm glad I did it. It helped me really solidify some of the details, but I abandoned it because I've discovered that if I can't keep it in my head, it's not important enough to be in the book. Like, if there's an idea or a concept or a piece of history or whatever that sort of doesn't stick in my head naturally, usually it just wasn't very good or didn't fit or wasn't interesting or just didn't have a place. So these days I do sort of keep it all in my noggin. That said, while I'm writing, I do have like a notes thing where I'm constantly jotting down little details. Like the detail work that's a different thing. It requires some lists and stuff. But in terms of like the history and the like how the magic works and the like complicated twist crafts and the different kinds of people and the way they ripped their minds into and all that other stuff, I just try to remember it.
Have you shared that with anyone? Did the kind of the roadmap you wrote 6 years ago, has anyone else ever read that?
No, at that point I couldn't have paid my friends to read something like that. I couldn't even get them to read, the actual I have a couple friends who have been lifelong, amazing, awesome. They read everything I gave them, but as a new writer, it can sometimes be challenging to try to talk your friends and family into reading your work. There's no way they're going to read a novel length, fake history of a place that existed only in my head. I don't, and I'm kind of glad that nobody did at this point. I think it's one of those things that it's better being mysterious. I think the reality of it wouldn't be as much fun as like somebody who likes the book imagining what that might be. Yeah. So I might just keep that secret.
I agree. The sense of, at least for me personally as a reader, the sense of mystery and trying to solve and speculating, I have many theories again where this might go. That's part of the fun. And then you reread and you connect other things, and it's part of the magic of the book.
Thanks. Yeah, I that's part of the fun. Well, I mean, most of it is fun at times, but that's part of the fun of it is like playing with the reader's expectations. I'm a little bit of a I don't know what you'd call a trickster, a Loki figure. I like, I like making you think something's going to happen and going like, nope. It can be very hard to do well, and it can be very unpleasant if it's not done well. And I'm sure that for some readers I get it wrong sometimes, of course. But again, it's always glad to hear that some of the twists and turns worked.
I had a great time reading it, but one of the things that makes this book for me again special is there were very beautiful moments in this. So I want to read a very small passage from the book that I really loved, and then I'll ask something based on that. Something caught her eye then, moving erratically in the gentle dimness, sparkling a little in the light from the silver rings overhead. It was small and seemed to dance around on invisible wind currents. Sophie frowned, looking at it, and it made its fluttering way over, nosing inquisitively at her, and then landed on the back of her hand. It was a butterfly. Its finely gossamer wings opened and closed slowly. There was no gear work, no silver, just the soft intricacy of a true-born creature. Next to her, Evie watched to see what Sophie would do. Sophie began to cry. The question I wanted to ask is, I live in a concrete jungle. We have trees and we have sunlight, but a lot of the time we become inward-facing, stuck to our screens. And sometimes we don't realize the value of something until it is gone. This scene with Sophie, I know why she began to cry. It's that kind of moment. How much of this have you experienced yourself? The gradual loss or the moving away from nature, or even loss of a certain form of wildlife or something. There's something there which came into this book, and as I said, someone who's sort of sometimes feels stuck in this concrete jungle with these cars and everything is very gray and sort of human made. Some loss of connection with nature. Like as I said, I know why Sophie cried. So tell me a little bit, please, about this.
Yeah, that's a. I'm really heart-warmed that you picked that part of the book out, because it's a really important part to me, because I love mechanical things, I love building things, I love computers and technology and all that stuff. I've been fascinated with it my whole life, but I also grew up building forts in the woods, and my most significant memories are just picking a direction and walking until I get lost, and then figuring out how to get back home. And I wanted to tell a story about a big technological place where obviously things went wrong. That's what's interesting about it, but about at least some of our characters coming to realize how important just the pure simplicity of like a tree and some sunshine and some animals chirping and the smell of woods would be if you had never experienced that before, or only get to experience that in a tiny little way. And I do think I'm not trying to make, well, I won't talk too much about what I'm trying to say, because hopefully we'll figure all that out in book 3, right? But I can. It's safe to say I'm not trying to make some kind of like anti-city or anti-technology or anti-concrete walls statement at all. Just one that technology and the way that we live can be wonderful, but sometimes it's worth it to put a little bit of work into enjoying the rest of it, because we're lucky enough where you don't have to find a magic door into a forest with sunshine. You can just for some it's easier than others to drive out of the city or be able to get out of the city or get to a park, but you can do it. And I think I don't do it nearly enough. I live 10 minutes walk away from a lovely beach, and I go there like 3 times a year. It's awful. So maybe that part of the book is me yelling at myself, But that sort of reverence for the natural world. The same as there's I hope a certain reverence for like ourselves and the way our minds work, and humanity, whatever being human means in terms of, even if the flip side of the coin is greed and avarice, the other side is hope and love. You don't get the one without the other, but it's good to focus on the nice side of the coin once in a while, if that makes any sense.
It's a great passage to pick too.
I loved it. There were many passages. I'm a bit of a quotes aficionado, so when I'm reading, I'm always marking stuff. But that one, when I heard that there would be this opportunity, it's beautiful, and that was the part which made me choke up, because, as I said, I know exactly why Sophie began to. I think I know exactly what was happening when Sophie began to. Should I ask a difficult question?
I know it's coming.
Why else are we here?
China Miéville or Jeff VanderMeer?
Oh, that's not difficult, unfortunately.
Oh.
Sorry, Jeff. I'm China. I'm China all the way. I got like, especially like
I'm Team Jeff.
I love. Okay, we're gonna have to, I don't know, thumb battle or something.
Ambergris versus New Crobuzon. Ambergris all the way.
See, I loved Ambergris, but especially Perdido Street Station and The Scar. Like, The Scar is easily one of my top 5 books of all time. I love that book beyond life or reason. I love it so much. If for VanderMeer, I'm a whatever you call it, like a the person who just likes the team because they're winning, but Annihilation and the whole Southern Reach series are just, oh my god, I love them so much. Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but Team China over here.
Yeah, that wasn't difficult though. How about Neil Stephenson or China Miéville?
Man, this is going to be easy too because Neil Stephenson's my favorite writer of all time.
Oh.
Yeah, what's your favorite Neil Stephenson book? Oh,
Royal Society
nice.
Shenanigans. I'm here for it.
Yeah, that is an uncommon choice, and I am here for it. I'm unfortunately like I have two absolute easy answers. My favorite movie of all time, without even any question, there's nothing even remotely close, is the film Drive with Ryan Gosling. It's just my favorite. There's nothing. There's no chance that any other movie will ever topple it. And my favorite book is Cryptonomicon. Like, there's just no. The next one up in line is so far away that there's no chance like it will ever be toppled. So yeah, Stevenson's got to win.
So these were not difficult questions, which is good. Yay.
They weren't. Yeah, these normally these are usually hard for me, but these two happen to be pretty easy.
I think you said that there are a handful of books which you like to keep revisiting. So I'm guessing Scar, Cryptonomicon, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else which you would recommend or which you really, really love?
Shifting genres a tiny little bit, there's a graphic novel series called Transmetropolitan. That's Oh, you know Transmet?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's I love it. It's a little prickly. It's a little hard to recommend to people, but it's like it was a precursor to The Boys. So like if you like The Boys, kind of very outrageous humor and craziness, you might like Transmetropolitan. In terms of books, oh man, I think my mind's going blank a little bit.
This is where my obsessive need to make lists and rank everything and recategorize everything else.
I would say I really love All of the Dark Tower by Stephen King, but the Gunslinger, the first one, is the one that has affected me the most. It's the one I stole the most from for the failures, as anybody that reads it will instantly be able to tell. And the Gunslingers, and it's such a short little book. It's one I'll just pick up and read it, and I won't, I'll read the whole series every once in a while or listen to it. But that first book is that's a touchstone for me. How about y'all? What do we like? What's our favorites? What's on our desert island list?
Go ahead, Paromita.
How many choices am I getting, and do series count as one?
Series count as one, yeah. I'm a big believer.
And how many choices am I getting?
Let's give you 3.
Lord of the Rings.
Great,
Definitely.
Great choice.
Picture of Dorian Gray is one of my all-time favorite books, but I don't think I would take it to a desert island. I would live with the memory of it. The Secret History by Donna Tartt, or is it The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt? I'm agonizing over this. I'll go with The Secret History.
I haven't read either one. See, this is why these questions are fun.
Yeah.
I want to take Agatha Christie, but again, Agatha Christie, she's my favorite author, but I remember all the books, so I want to take something chunky. No, always go for something which touched your heart. So, Annie of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery.
That's that reminded me of another one. Lonesome Dove is one of my favorite books. It sounds like a weird thing, but when I was growing up, that was one of the few things my entire gigantic Hungarian family could agree on was watching or reading Anne of Green Gables and the Disney the Disney series was so good, and then Lonesome Dove, and then there was like a television series, and we would just those were our two literary things that we liked. So sorry, that was just, oh my goodness, I'm so glad you said that. It was awesome.
It's again one of my all-time favorites. I can do a top 10, but 3 is like because Alice in Wonderland is staring at me. It's like, what did you do? Wuthering Heights is staring at me. So yeah, and now I don't
want to make Steve check the clock too often. So I thought keep it to 3, even though I took like 10.
I was trying to go over my just from the hip. I would say 1984.
Oh, nice.
Watchmen, and the Second Apocalypse.
The Second Apocalypse.
R. Scott Baker.
Oh, Darkness That Comes Before.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, it's been a while since I've read those. I gotta read
We just finished our reread a couple days ago, so it's so fresh on my mind.
That isn't Mike from Mike's Book Reviews reading that right now?
He's
I think he started it.
He really liked it.
We had a reading group who read a few chapters at a time, and we would discuss it every week. So our last episode we recorded last Tuesday. So it's
That's great. I mean, those books are hardcore, and I don't know. I feel like I love that some of these more. Man, I hate to say obscure, but I feel like that book is a little bit older now, and that it's sort of finding new life with y'all, and there's new people sort of discovering it and sharing it and talking about how kind of amazing it is. It's just, oh man, that makes my heart warm, cockles of my heart warm up over there. Love it.
It freaked me out so much.
Yeah, it ain't for the weak of heart.
Yeah, that trilogy is not for me. Yeah, so my threshold is my threshold for gritty or violent stuff is probably A Song of Ice and Fire.
I mean, that's pretty gritty.
Yeah. Beyond that, I sort of no.
Yeah.
This is actually my hypothesis for why I prefer or in general I prefer VanderMeer over Miéville. Like Miéville is very gritty.
Real gross sometimes. There's sections that I'm like, oh, but I kind of like it. So
I like his, I like Unlondon. It's very, very beautiful, and I think my favorite book by him is probably Embassy Town. So those books I like.
It's an interesting choice.
You didn't like it,
but
Steve?
I've heard that choice from a fair number of people, and I did not care for Embassy Town. I love City. I love City and the City.
See, we are opposite. I did not like City and the City.
Oh my goodness!
And people were like Kafkaesque, and I was like, "What is this?" And I actually like mysteries, and Agatha Christie is my favorite. But this is what, like, you never know what's going to click and what's not going to click.
Yeah.
That's true.
Which is, well, I guess it depends. If you're looking for recommendations, it's a bit unreliable, but otherwise it's fun. Anyone who loves Gormenghast is my friend, because I want more people to love.
Can I tell you a terrible secret?
Yeah.
It's going to make you want to throw my book across the room. I actually never read Gormenghast until about 3 or 4 years ago. I had like almost all of my favorite things. That was their favorite book, and I think I had tried to read it years and years and years ago, and it was I wasn't in the mood. It was too dry.
One has to be in the mood. It is totally a mood book, because it's baroque, it's dark, and
it's so good. I mean, I'm definitely going to read it many, many times in the future, but I'm always embarrassed to, because my book does get compared to it wonderfully. That's amazing. Sometimes I'm a little like, I only just read it. I'm a poser. But well, I'm glad that we all have I like science fiction and fantasy and reading. It's a big tent. There's room for all kinds of us. Even us Embassy Town people, I guess, can hang out. We'll let them inside the tent.
And I know we told you we wouldn't put you on the spot, but we have to put you on the spot because we have a forum that we have what we call forum battles, and we vote on things and just silly things like mac and cheese or spaghetti or different silly debates. Our latest one was science fiction or fantasy. That's drawn a lot of disagreements. What do you think? What if you had to pick one? What would you pick?
Well, you're not going to like my answer because I don't think that there's any material difference between the two.
I've heard that opinion from very, very well-read one of my friends, and he will actually defend it very, very well.
Yeah, but there's also a part of me that's like, you know what they mean. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah, it's the shelving for the readers.
You don't need to go on a rant about. But it's a tough one because I love both things, which is why in my own writing I like to try to combine them as much as possible, and I tend to like things that have a little bit of both because I love this could possibly maybe be a real thing of science fiction. I love the sort of more mechanical nature of a lot of the books, like hard science fiction. The plotting can have this very like I don't want to say gritty, but like visceral quality that fantasy sometimes lacks because it's a little bit more like, oh well, what if this was true? Which I know a lot of science fiction has too, but like this is a very long answer to a very simple question. But on the other hand, I desperately love magic and portal fantasy and want to walk through a door into a place where lizards can talk and rainbows have feelings and stuff. Like, I want that so bad.
You speaking now is our entire forum battle. It's just people agonizing with pain, and Steve hasn't been able to vote yet.
I voted.
He's just like, don't make me choose. I'm team fantasy.
I'm glad I'd fit in. I think I have to be team fantasy. Yeah, like if gun to the head, if it's one or the other, it's got to be fantasy. But that's tough. I don't like it. I don't like being pushed into this corner, Steve.
Yes,
okay.
I know. I sorry, I misled you. I voted earlier. I finally voted science fiction.
Oh, what?
Just to be contrary. Just to.
Oh, is fantasy winning?
I think it's tied. Last I checked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's tied.
I don't know. I need to start offering bribes or something now because this is not okay. I'll work on it after this conversation because this is alarming stuff. We have Grandpa Tolkien. What else do you want?
Oh, Tolkien.
Just read a lot of things and vote fantasy. I'm very dumb. I respect all opinions, unless they are wrong, in which case.
I'll offer a little bit of spice you can toss into the forum. I'm gonna say a very controversial statement that'll get me canceled right here and now, right at the beginning of everything. I think that there has been a lot more bad fantasy written than there's been bad science fiction, and that is part of why I think science fiction sometimes tends to win these arguments. I think the best of fantasy is better than the best of science fiction, but fantasy there's a lot of not super amazing fantasy. Not like right now I think we're in a little bit of a like wonderful like flourishing zone of explosions of ideas and wonderful whatever, but like I grew up in the 80s and man, there was for every Tad Williams and Robin Hobb, there were a lot of people who had read Tolkien once and were just, I'm going to do that again. We know what we're talking about. But okay, that's it. Yeah. I'm done being controversial.
No, I actually completely agree. I think there's a lot of bad fantasy out there.
Yeah.
A lot of really great fantasy too, but
yeah, it's hard. It's you don't like calling something bad, especially if somebody out there is getting enjoyment and use out of it, and there's no empiric. My bad is different from your bad, and blah blah blah. But I think generally speaking, you can say there are certain levels of prose writing quality, and sometimes some of the fantasy cannot always be. I'm just going to shut up. I'm going to stop talking.
No, we're not naming names or anything, but they're, yeah.
I was going to sort of come at this different. So we talked about science fantasy, which has some really, really amazing books. But there are also some authors who did both immaculately. One of them is my favorite science fiction author, and I think she has a little bit to do with your pseudonym. So maybe we can hear the story, and that's the late Ursula K. Le Guin.
Ursula K. Le Guin. I want to say one of my favorites, but I don't even think I've read all of her books, so I can't.
No,
really
neither
that.
have I. I've read Earthsea and Hainish, and then stuff here and there. Like I'm always coming home, which is an experimental novel by her. It's beautiful, beautiful. So I've read stuff like that here and there, and she just always continues to wow. So, but I wanted to sort of segue into your pseudonym, which I found a very nice anecdote. So would you share that with us, please?
Sure. Yeah. I'll say I actually love her writing about writing is some of my favorite stuff in the entire world. She's like, I love her books, but her writing about writing is just fantastic, amazing. I met a Le Guin scholar at Worldcon this year, and unfortunately he was like, "Oh, the quote that you attribute your last name to is not, like, you're getting it really wrong." Like you're not even close. But he was like he was like, you're getting the sentiment of what she was saying right, but like none of the words are there. And I was like, oh man, I've been saying this for years, so I'm not gonna stop. That guy can just.
But he got the sense of it right, which is what she would have loved.
Get on his own podcast. Yeah, I think the sense of it is right. I'm belaboring this too long. So the quote that I had been sort of saying and that I had read, maybe I read it paraphrased or I paraphrased myself, is that all writers are liars. Fiction, if you're writing fiction, you're lying. You're telling objective untruths. You're spinning magic tricks and fairy stories. Not a word of anything in a book is actually true. But if, as a writer, if we do it really well, if we try really hard, sort of like, we can tell more profound truths than any objective reality. Like, by lying, we can connect with something fundamental deep inside people. And I just loved that. And for personal reasons, I wanted to use a pseudonym for my writing career. And it's not the only reason I picked liar, but it's the easiest one to say in a short little soundbite, that's for sure. And I've always loved that. I just love that quote. I love channeling that idea, and I loved sort of, there's the sense of, it is such a funny psychic phenomenon, but if you tell people that you're a liar, they are more inclined to believe you. Like, if you tell people you're a liar, they are more inclined to trust you than if you tell people you're trustworthy. It's bananas. I'm like, I have it tattooed right on my wrist. Like, I wasn't joking. But yeah. Anyway, that's my Ursula K. Le Guin anecdote.
Who else do you think does science fiction and fantasy really well? I mean, who writes in both genres?
Oh boy,
Tad
these
Williams,
are the questions
maybe?
that I'm. What's that?
Tad Williams, maybe, because he has Otherland, and then he also has Ostenard. They're kind of both awesome, but
yeah, they're both very. Go ahead. Sorry,
I was just about to say the only other two I can think of, because we talked about them, are VanderMeer and Miéville. So the new weird people.
Yeah, they tend to be comfortable existing in the slipstream there. I keep looking over my shoulder at my bookshelf, hoping inspiration will strike. I know that there's some names. As soon as I'm not able to say them, I'm gonna kick myself.
My situation tends to be even more awkward, because it's like somebody will ask me, "Hey, didn't you read this book?" I'm like, I did. Let me look at the summary. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't care.
Right.
I'll totally blank out on the entire content of the book, not just the name of it, which I think is much more. It gets very awkward. I mean, I can't think of. It's not coming to me either right now, but it's an interesting thing. It's always very amazing to me how some people can dabble, especially like Talbot Williams. He went from like uh, Memory Sorathon to publishing Otherland. I think VanderMeer has a sort of Miéville, of course, is on some other level. I think he's done. I don't know. I don't think he has a genre left actually.
Yeah,
because he's done nonfiction now too.
Yeah, he just likes to challenge himself, I think, which I respect.
Maybe Tchaikovsky.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Very much.
That's a great one. I almost wanted to say he's not spoken of often anymore for very good reasons, but Orson Scott Card was great at navigating between the two. Second Son and Ender's Game are opposite ends, but very good. You can pull out some old names like Robert Silverberg and
I think I saw this in one of your interviews actually. Gene Wolfe, because he's done.
Gene Wolfe, yes.
He's done the whole Solar thing, and then he's done Wizard Knight stuff like Plateau in the Mist.
Yeah. Well, no, I was about to argue that even his science fiction has strong fantasy elements, but like he's done some like. But again, getting into the labels, what do they really mean? He definitely set some of his stories in space and with spacey stuff, so it counts. Yeah, but no, Gene Wolfe is an amazing touchdown there. It actually, I wonder if it's it used to be more of a thing, because I can think of a lot of like 70s, even hard sci-fi writers that had their fantasy series, like Chronicles of Amber and other ones I'm not thinking of, but Tchaikovsky is definitely Tchaikovsky. He's one of the few that springs to mind of like modern writing authors that does very clearly jumps genres like that, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
James S.A. Corey, do that was fantasy? Am I just thinking The Expanse?
I think so. Daniel Abraham. Yeah.
Oh, Daniel. Oh, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, he started out in fantasy, before he decided to partner up and make all the money.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Which talk about a career. Talk about a good idea right there. I love it.
Yeah.
Would you actually ever want to or consider maybe co-writing or working with someone maybe on a game or novel, like something like what, as you said, James S.A. Cordes, or actually recently Miéville and Keanu Reeves has done, which was a collaboration I was not expecting at all. Is that something that you would be interested in at some point as an author?
Oh my God, yeah. I'm thinking of This Is How You Lose the Time War as well. Great collaboration. I have a writing buddy named Dan Cohen, amazing writer that I'd love. We keep poking at projects, and when we have the time and we find the right idea, we'd love to collaborate on something. Writing is one of the reasons I didn't want to be like a writer is it's very lonely. Like you spend a lot of time inside your own head and sitting at a keyboard, and I love the idea of partnering up with somebody, but like most writers, I'm also a hideous control freak, and so it's finding the right project, it's finding the right person that you can collaborate with, and the idea that you love enough to put the work into it, but don't love so much that you need to like make it into your thing, So short answer is absolutely. I'd love to do that at some point, but just finding the right thing, and then finding the time. If I told my agent I was working on anything other than book 2 right now, he would probably hire a sniper to, I don't know, shoot my video game controller out of my hand or something.
your agent and of course your editor are both thanked in your afterward, and she's both of them are kind of titans at this point, aren't they? But I wanted to ask about maybe tell us a little bit about how you met your agent and then met Miss Walheim, Betsy Walheim, was the head of the
Sure.
door, because she has this knack of just discovering gems, and this is the third one for me where it's just become I read it and it's like all time favorite category going into that. The other two are the Dragonborn Chair, which was also Miss Walheim's discovery, and Name of the Wind.
Yep.
So
So I would like to propose an adjustment to what you just said. I think that Betsy is incredibly good at polishing up gems. I don't think they're necessarily gems when they get to her. She's good at recognizing potential and then helping polish it up, and she's willing to do the work in a way that has been phenomenal to me. But I kind of have it's a little bit of a funny story if we have a few minutes for it.
Yeah.
For how my agent Matt Bieler is I guess quite famous as agents go. He's Ted Williams' agent, Patrick Rothfuss, a few other very high profile, Stephen Lawhead, a few other high profile clients, and I had sort of taken a very Eminem approach to getting my first book published. I was like, I only got one shot, I'm getting older. I got no time to waste. I got to get this right. I only have, So I spent like 2 months and I found every agent I could possibly find. I read the back acknowledgement pages of all the books I liked, and I made a spreadsheet of all the agents' names and then all of their like contacts and like the books they've had, and then I ranked them by all these esoteric factors, like how much they might like my book, what I thought they could do for it, like whether that, how much clout do they have, blah, blah, blah. And then I sorted them by basically my ranking. And I was like, okay, I'm going to send this to 10 a piece. I'm settling in for 2-3 year long process of finding an agent. Everything I've ever seen or read tells me what a awful thing this is going to be. So I'm ready for it. And I almost didn't even send out the query letters to my top 10 because they were all huge names. I mean, just there was no chance at all that they were going to be reading their slush pile or like whatever. But I was like, dude, just do it. You need to get used to rejection. Send it to the top 10. And my number one pick, the number one on the entire spreadsheet, was Matt Bieler, because he was Tad's and Pat's agent and had done so much work and he had such a legendary reputation. And so I sent him off, and I was like, okay. And I went to hang drywall with my cousin to make some ramen noodle money. And I got I got a request from. Oh no, it wasn't that day. It was just I had sent it out, and like within like 2 hours, I got a request for a full manuscript from his assistant.
Wow.
And I was like, what? Yeah, here's the whole thing. And then I think it was 2 days later, I was hanging drywall with my cousin, and I got an email from him basically offering representation if I was willing to like work on the book and rewrite some stuff. And it was, I just like, my cousin's a very stoic, construction dude, and I like broke down in tears in his truck, like crying like a little baby. It's. Most writers who have been through the process or are going through the process probably want to punch me right in my little face right now, and you are right to do so. That's crazy. It's bananas that I got offered representation like 2 days after I sent my very first query of my entire life out. It's silly. It's ridiculous. And to my top agent too. Like it's bananas. And then we probably spent like 4 or 5 months and a ton of Adderall rewriting the book. And I completely threw out huge chunks of the book and rewrote them. And that was a wild summer. And then we sold it to Betsy very quickly too. She read, I think, just like 20 pages and she was like, I'm in, let's do it. Which again, yeah, if you see me out in public, throw stuff at me. I deserve all of it. but then if it helps a little bit, if you're feeling that anger bubbling up right now, if it helps, once I sold it, the company that we were with, or Betsy's company, DAW, was sort of under the umbrella of one of the big 5 at that time publishing houses, and then they ran into trouble. They had to find a new home. There was just problem after problem after problem, and it ended up being about 6 years from when I sold it to when we finally got it published, which was a devastatingly long time to wait. It was pretty rough. So it, if that balances the cosmic scales a tiny little bit, I hope it does. But yeah, that was sort of my fun and weird little path to publication.
Wow.
It sort of makes me want to ask you the next question is, what was the best part? Once you were in the process that this is going to be a book and it's going to be out in the world, what was the best part of that process? What was the toughest part?
Interesting. There's if anybody's been through the process, they know this without me having to say it, and if you haven't, it's hard to describe. It's a lot of very high highs and a lot of very low lows, and in between those highs and lows are unbelievably tedious periods of just waiting. Just waiting for the email, waiting for the call, waiting to find out if the whole thing is going to fall apart or it's all going to go good, or then how's the book going to get received, all that stuff. It can be extraordinarily exciting and it can be extraordinarily awful sometimes, and it's mostly just so boring, so boring. So if you're not prepared for a life of constant tedium, I do not recommend becoming a writer. But I would say it would be hard to match that day when I'm covered in insulation and drywall dust, working with my cousin, and not to sob story, but just very broke, very I had been a starving artist for quite a long time at that point, and to get that email offering representation by my number one choice, the first time that somebody in the industry or that had some sort of ability to make something happen went, "Hey, you're not entirely terrible at this," was a tremendous. It was. There's nothing that could compare to that moment. And then me and my cousin had a beer, and then I called all my friends, and we went out to the bar that night, and it's just happy file, the high fives and smiles and tears, and it'd be hard to pick a better moment than that. Even though there have been my release party where it was wonderful, all my friends came out, we had a good time. There's a couple moments going to some conventions and meeting some people have been really amazing. And the worst, I think, is there's not really any one bad time. The worst was I moved down to Austin, Texas, and I didn't realize how expensive Austin, Texas had gotten. And I was down there, and just the moment when I realized, oh, this is not this process is not happening soon. And I sort of made some plans and did some stuff sort of thinking that maybe this process would be happening soon. And now I got to kind of really, really make some other decisions. That was a pretty bleak time, knowing it was not going to be months, it was going to be years. It was rough. Once you're through it, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, I had a ton of fun, and I got a bunch of work done, and I made a video game, and I wrote another book, and blah blah blah. But there were definitely some dark moments in there. So yeah, there you go. I guess that answers the question.
So I have to ask, what other book did you write, and when can we read it?
It is. It's still not. We're kind of we're very focused on the failures in the sequel right now. So hopefully it will see the light of day at some point. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But it's I think it's safe to say it's a. Are we familiar with what a portal fantasy is? Alice in Wonderland, or
Narnia.
Narnia, Land Rover books. It was sort of my homage to that. So it's this portal fantasy about a extremely depressed painter who can't see color anymore, that goes back to a very vibrant and colorful and kind of insane childhood world that she had gone to when she was a child. She was like the hero in the world, and the child, you might see some like parallels with Sophie here. And then of course she has to go on a journey and rediscover her and it's, yeah, I won't say any more about it. I really love it. It's probably the most personal thing I've written. Hopefully we will I'll be able to share some good news about it with you at some point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
So the time always flies. But Paromita, did you have another question? I want to cut you off.
I have two, so I'll cut one. But I want to ask both. No, I'll be good.
Go for it. No, go ahead.
So
I'll try to keep my answers quick.
We have time. Yeah.
I think I asked this in the beginning that a lot of your book focuses on characters who are not quite fitting in or who've fallen off the track and not been able to get it. They have regrets and there's a lot of pain. And there are a lot of people like this in the world right now. It's happening to a lot of us. What would you say to them at this point?
I think one of the themes of the book, or at least one that I try to highlight, is that, you know, we're all caught in these powerful systems of people that might not even be evil, but they're looking out for their own interests, or they have goals, and they are willing to do what it takes to do what they think is important, and we are just cogs in their machines. And that can be very, our hopes and dreams don't matter to them or the wider world or the larger machine of society that we are in. And that can be very alienating. It can be very depressing. It can be very difficult to wake up in the morning and do things that you feel like are important. And I guess I would say to them, and what I hope that the book is sort of trying to say, or is going to try to say, is like, you are important. You're important to the people around you. You're important to the people that you have a connection with. You're important to the small ways that, or maybe not small, in whatever ways you make the world a little bit better. And that is not nothing. That is important. And if there is anything that matters at the end of this experience, this journey of life, it's those connections, it's those moments you had with the people you love, the ways that you made the world just a tiny little bit better. It's way more important than inventing a new kind of rocket ship or trying to put people on Mars or whatever the fuck. Sorry.
I gotta say, I'm disappointed. We were told you were gonna curse like a sailor, and that's the first time you've cursed. So. I'm
trying to get better. Yeah.
That's a great question to answer, though. It's hard to, sometimes it's hard to see, what matters in your own, what's around you, and when you get lost in all the noise, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
My last question is regarding the cover. It's beautiful, such a beautiful cover. So when I read the book, it's so alluring, and as I said, it's so atmospheric, and then you have this world and there are layers, and I think a lot of that comes through in the cover. Did you have any input on that? Did you have sketches or ideas in your mind when you worked with the artist, or was it more of a independent thing from the cover artist?
So oh man, this is funny. I knew when I picked the last name Liar for myself for my pen name, I was going to have to be like pretty truthful about most things, and like this is one of those cases where I want to take credit for that cover so much, but I actually argued against that cover. I wanted a different one that would have been so much worse, and this was Betsy Walheim, my editor, sort of, and my agent sort of collaboratively fought for this one. And as a writer, you don't get to choose your cover. They sort of provided some like ideas, and then we they were very awesome at, like, I talked about what I liked, what we didn't like, but this was not one of my favorites, at least the early versions of it. And it's one of those things where it's like, there's nothing I love more than being wrong sometimes. Like,
I was going to sneak in a cheeky question. How does it feel to be so wrong?
Yeah. It's, I mean, of course it always stings a little bit. Like, I think people should really embrace, like, being wrong is awesome, because you learn
exactly.
something.
I'm wrong all the time. But this cover is awesome. On that, I'm right.
Yes. Yeah. No. I couldn't agree more. Like, I look at the cover now and I'm like, what's wrong with you? That cover's amazing. Like,
maybe sometimes you have
I love
to
it
see
so
it
much.
Like, maybe you have to hold it and then you see it in the thing.
Or sometimes you're just wrong. You're just dumb. So yeah, all credit to Betsy, Matt, the artists that work on it. I think they did an absolute fantastic job in spite of me, and I'm so glad that they did.
So I have to sneak in one last question, because I'm trying to ask all of our guests. What was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, first job, a little bit hard to say, because I grew up kind of as a child laborer for my dad's construction company. Not even, like, he would take me to work with him, and then as I got a younger teenager, he'd pay me a little bit, like, extra allowance money and stuff to go help him on his jobs and scrap out drywall and stuff like that. But my first, like, job that I ever got was detailing cars. I did that for a summer, just like really cleaning like high-end sports cars and stuff. And I learned, it's so long ago now, I don't know that I learned any incredibly important life lessons other than how to show up, vaguely on time. But I remember, like, kind of, like, it sounds silly, but like detailing. Detail is important. Like, take the extra time. I remember I was used to try to rush through, and the boss had just, like, he was just like, stop, look at the cracks, look at the details. It's important. Like, even if you kind of can't see it, you can still see it. Like, if you take care of the details, the whole thing pops in a way that maybe I'm kind of awkwardly trying to draw a parallel to writing now that, I don't know that I definitely didn't know that at the time, but yeah, it definitely, it was fun to really pay attention to detail there.
Well, thanks for making time for us. If you'd like to ever come back, or you'd like to join the fights on the forum, let us know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We have a nice little group there, but yeah, thanks and we know you're busy, so thanks so much for making time.
No, of course. This was wonderful to have the conversation. So nice to meet you both.
Yeah, and for anyone looking to find more about you and your work, where's the best place to find you, and where's the best place to find your work?
Probably, so I'm most active on Instagram at Benjamin Liar, I would say. And then I have a website, benjaminliar.com, that has, the links to the relevant stuff. Those are two best places to look.
Great website too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Really cool. Yeah. And Paromita, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is the Page Chewing Forum, managing battles. The important questions of our time. I just wanted to say a quick thing, which is, other than the physical copy, and the digital format, the audiobook for the book is also awesome. So if people want to experience that, because the second time I did it via audio and ebook mixed, and then the audiobook is wonderful, but I was like, I read this faster by I shifted to ebook, but the audiobook is really, really awesome. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
I think it's contracted and in progress, so I think I'm allowed to say, though I haven't formally announced it yet, that they're doing a graphic audio version as well.
Oh, wow.
So people who like that sort of full cast with the sound effects and stuff, I think that will be out by this winter. I'll shout about it loud on all of the channels when that happens.
Nice. Well, excited for that.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for making time for us, and hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk to everyone very soon.
All right. Y'all have a great one.